And Isaiah, when he wrote this, he wasn't expecting an answer. God didn't want anyone to raise his hand and say, oh, I can't. No, God was saying, yeah, I do. Right there, that 860 miles, that's nothing. Then he goes on and says, with the breadth of his hand marked off the heavens. Okay, the breadth. So like that. Take your hands and go like this. Can you, I mean, maybe like you can do part of the heaven if it's really close to your face. But no, God is saying, I've done that. And now, okay, I just wanted to do this for fun. I didn't think they could actually, measure the sky. But someone was crazy enough to try. And I don't have this part memorized. But I think, actually, yeah. Okay, if the sky were measured, if using the calculation to find the area of a circle, so they're taking the Earth as a circle and the atmosphere and stuff to find the measurement of the sky, it would be 40,000 square degrees. You're like, what's a square degree? That means nothing to me. Me either. But the moon, in comparison, the moon is about a half a degree across, giving it an area of 0.2 degrees. That moon, okay? So the moon is 0.2 degrees, and the sky that we see is 40,000 degrees. God's just like, yeah, I got that. It's right here. Not a big deal to me. And he goes on and says, who has held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains on the scales and the hills in a balance? Couldn't even find a statistic for that. Who's weighed a mountain? Nobody. Okay? Mountains are really heavy. And it says, who has understood the mind of the Lord, or instructed him as his counselor? Whom did the Lord consult to enlighten him, or taught him the right way? Who was it that taught him knowledge, or showed him the path of understanding? And Isaiah's just like, this is a barrage of questions like, do you know the mind of the Lord? Can you honestly say? And sometimes, we're obviously thinking, oh, no, I don't know the mind of the Lord. Please. But sometimes we live as if we do. And sometimes we live as if we know better than him. And so God and Isaiah, he's just speaking through Isaiah saying, you don't know. You don't know. You can't match my understanding. You can't measure it. And he goes on, okay? Now just hang with me. I know this is a lot, but we're just talking about how great God is, so it has to go on for a while. It says, surely the nations are like a drop in a bucket. All right, and when I thought, that just kind of makes me laugh, because, think about it. All right, so America, we've been considered a superpower for a while, I guess. I don't know where we're headed, but, America. Think about North Korea. That's a pretty dangerous nation. China, they've got a lot of people. And sometimes we get overwhelmed when we think about the nations. It's like, oh no, what if North Korea blows the world up? And these are fairly legitimate concerns. But God's saying something that we see so important. All throughout history, these nations have risen and fallen. And, we live our lives based on these nations and these societies. And God's like, those nations, they're like a drop in a bucket to me. That's about how much they affect me. Like a little drop. Not even a water in a bucket. It's not like a pail full of water. Nations are like a bucket of water. No, they're like a drop of water. Dink, dink, dink. Now, think about it this way. Have you ever been frightened by a drop of water? Besides surprised or scared. Have you ever looked at the drop of water and been like, no, don't defeat me. No. You guys are looking at me. I know, I'm weird. It's okay. But think about it. We are not frightened by water, a drop of water. It's nothing to us. That's what God is saying the nations are to me. I don't look at the nations and say, oh no, they're going to overthrow me. Oh no, what's going to happen next? Just ding, ding, ding. They're regarded as dust on the scales. He weighs the islands as though they were fine dust. Lebanon is not sufficient for altar fires. And so here he switches it a little bit. He says Lebanon. Now Lebanon was an area north of Palestine. It was like a mountain range covered with forest. Okay? We can relate to that in Pennsylvania. We have a lot of hills and mountains covered with forest. And he was saying, if you would take all of Lebanon and you would cut down every single tree and you would make a fire, it wouldn't be big enough for a sacrifice that I'm worthy of. You can't. All those trees. If you would take every animal in Pennsylvania, if you would take every one of them and slaughter them and put them on an altar to sacrifice to me as a burnt offering, just praising me, that'd be nothing to me. It's not that God didn't appreciate it, but he's just saying, you think you can measure my worth in an offering? No way. I'm way bigger than that. And then again, he says, before me all the nations are as nothing. They regard by him as worthless and less than nothing. And here's kind of Isaiah's point in all these verses. He's saying, okay, I've said this. Lebanon doesn't have fires. There's not enough animals. Have you created the sky? Can you measure it? No, no, no. The answer is God for all of those. He says, to whom then will you compare God? What image will you compare him to? And this was one that really got Israel. Okay, as Israel was reading this is the convicting point. Step on the toes, okay? It says, as for an idol, they had this problem falling into idolatry because all the nations were like that. And I could compare that to America, but we don't have time. So, as for an idol, a craftsman casts it. A goldsmith overlays it with gold and fashions silver chains for it. So he's like, okay, are you going to compare this to God? You take it and you put some gold on it, you put some silver on it, and voila, idol. And then I feel like he's being sarcastic here almost, because he goes on and says, okay, well, say you can't afford that. A man too poor to get the gold and the silver that is so worthy of your praise. Yeah, well, he might try to find a piece of tree, maybe a stump or something, and he would hope that he finds one that doesn't rot too easily, because then he's going to go and he's going to carve it really skillfully, and that will be his idol. It's like God's saying, like, yeah, hopefully your idol doesn't rot, because, you might have to get a new one in a few years. Who are you going to compare God to? Are you going to lower him to an idol? Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? I know. We're just going straight through the scripture. I hope you're still with me here. But just a lot of questions. Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded, since way back before we were born, before lots of people were born, in the beginning, that he sits enthroned? He's a king. He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and his people are like grasshoppers. That's another thing that would not necessarily be a compliment, okay? It's just saying you're pretty small. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. That's what the universe is to him. It's just a tent to hold us. It's just a little dwelling place for us. He brings princes to naught and reduces the rulers of the world to nothing. The people that we're so scared of, God's like, I bring them to nothing. No sooner are they planted or they're sown, no sooner do they take root in the ground than he blows on them. No, they're just little, well, not even a big breath, probably just a boom, they're gone. They wither, and a whirlwind sweeps them away like chaff. And again, now it's God asking this time. He says, to whom will you compare me? Who is my equal? And I think we'd probably do good if we would ask ourselves that a little more often. Like, who is equal to God? And when we look at our lives, say, am I really elevating something to the status of God? And that's not the point of my sermon, but that's good. It says, lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He brings out the starry host one by one and calls them each by name. Now, you may think I'm dumb for this, but I love looking at the sky, okay? Like when I feel stressed, when I feel problems, I love just to take a walk out in the field and look up and be like, whoa, I forgot how big this was. And I love to look at the stars, and we live up on a hill, so it's really nice. You can see the stars at night. And just going out there and thinking, wow. It's estimated, and we can't really know, but it's estimated that there are approximately 100,000 million stars in our galaxy. 100,000 million. I wish there was a way I could show you that, but I have no idea how big that is. I can't even picture a million. I was like, I count a few hundred maybe at night, but there are 100,000 million in our galaxy. Now, they also estimate and approximate, because we have no idea. The universe is pretty large. But they believe that there are approximately 100,000 million galaxies. And so they say it's kind of like there's probably the amount of stars that there are the sand on the beach, which really helps because we all know how many there are of those, right? No, that's another thing you can't really count. But they say if you take the little area of a beach and you count the number of grains of sand in that, and then you multiply that by the greater area of all the beaches, you can get an approximate number of how many grains of sand there are on beaches. And they said you can do the same thing for stars. So someone, again, trying to figure this out, said, okay, well, if there's 100,000 million stars in our Milky Way galaxy, and there's 100,000 million galaxies, then there must be, I don't know what number that is, but it's like 10 to the 24th power, which means 10, 24 zeros after it, and none of us really know what that is. Millions, billions, trillions, I don't know. That many stars, possibly, in the universe that we know of. And now take that mind-boggling thought and read this again. He brings out the starry host one by one. 1 trillion 1, 1 trillion 2, calls them each by name. I don't know. I don't really have too many names for the stars. I know there's some scientific ones. Maybe you. I know there's a movie where someone bought one for his girlfriend or something and named it. That was sweet. But God, he has a name for every one of the stars. Isn't that wild? 10 to the 24th power stars. And because of his great power and might, not one of them is missing. The stars, he leads them out at night. And now here's the point of the message that I want to get to, okay? This is what we've been working toward, because I've kind of wanted to follow Isaiah's line of thought here. He's making a point. So he starts out, hey, be comforted, don't worry. Time of suffering has an end. Then he says, get ready. God is coming. He says, men are weak sauce. And then God is awesome. No one compares to him. And now we get to this point, and this is the reason he's shown God. This is the reason he's asked all these questions, and he said all these things to show how great God is. He says, then why? In light of all this that I've said, why do you say, O Jacob? How can you complain, Israel, and say, my way is hidden from the Lord? My cause is disregarded by God. So Isaiah is saying, in light of who God is, looking at all this, how can you say that God doesn't see you? How can you say that God doesn't know what you're going through or care about what you're going through? And David asks a lot of questions like this in the Psalms, so we know it's not that God doesn't, I don't think he judges us and condemns us for asking him these questions. He wants us to be real. But he's saying that if you would look at who I am, if you would look at my character and my actions, my nature, how can you say that I don't see you? How can you say that I don't care? And he goes on, and this is the part that most of us know. This is to be like, oh yeah, I know that scripture. I read that many times. You might not have known that we're headed here, but he says, don't you know, haven't you heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He doesn't grow tired or weary. His understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary. What I love about this part too is because so far we've seen this picture of God that is just mind-blowing. It's huge. Okay, this is God. And so in case we're tempted to say, well, God is big and great, and of course he's awesome, but I'm a grasshopper. He doesn't care about grasshoppers. But Isaiah says he gives strength to the weary. This God who is so great, who just boggles our mind and blows our mind all the time when we think about him, he cares about the people who are down there, the underdogs. He cares about the weary. He increases the power of the weak. And just in case that this isn't in Isaiah 40, I'm going to step outside of the passage for a little bit here. But when we realize who God is, that's when we begin to realize how he feels about us. And sometimes it's easy to think we know who God is. God is great, God is wonderful, but he can't love me. But God gave us several indicators in his word throughout the Bible, and I'm only going to read one of them, but about how he feels about us. And this is a poem that someone wrote to God. Okay? You've all heard this. About how God feels about you. I'm just going to read a couple verses. This is Psalm 139. Read the whole chapter sometime. It says, how precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I wake, I'm still with you. And that's just a part of a poem where David is talking about how God never leaves him and how he's so close. And you can get that picture again of God as the shepherd holding you close to his heart. And this just blows my mind because I don't think this way. Like, When I think about God thinking about me, I think